Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join before I get started. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to wait for people to tune in before I get started. And while we wait, I want to encourage everyone to follow me on Twitter at New Pos Blog. Also, I want to encourage you all to follow my Facebook page, New Possibilities. If you go on Facebook, you can find that. If you search for New Possibilities, you will find my blog. And I encourage you all to like that page. Usually before I even discuss a lot of issues here on YouTube, I post articles about them. And the same is true on Twitter. And I also put out comments about various issues on Twitter and Facebook. I hope that you all can follow me on those platforms, on Twitter and on Facebook. Shout out to John Pro. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see that we have a few people in the house. So I just want to share some of my thoughts about Kamala Harris. And as many of you know, she was nominated to be the Democratic vice president. Joe Biden decided to select her. Many people have been in the running, but she's the one that he decided to select to be his vice president. And I just want to talk about this. I want to share my thoughts about this. And I'm really interested in hearing from you all as well. I want to know what you all think about this situation. So first of all, I will say to this is a historic moment. You know, this is the first time a Black woman has been nominated by a major political party to be vice president. So this is a major accomplishment, and it's something that's noteworthy. It's something for the history books. It is great for young girls to see an example of an educated Black woman, you know, a powerful Black woman being nominated to this position. So this is a moment that we should cherish, despite, you know, some political disagreements that we may have with the candidate. This is still a moment to be cherished. It is a major milestone in our history. It is a major development in our history. So that's something that we can't just pass over. And also, I just need to make it clear, you know, I went to Howard University. You know, as many people know, I graduated from Howard University. And Kamala Harris is also a graduate of Howard University. So I do have some sense of pride that a Howard grad has reached this high position. This is something that's great for my university, Howard University, which, as you know, is a historically Black university. So this is helping to bring positive light on Howard University. So that's a positive development. You know, I will say this, one thing that has to be mentioned is, you know, this talk about identity. You know, many people are classifying her as an African American and celebrating this as if this is an African American achievement. I see this as Black achievement. And I don't make distinctions between these different groups, but we have to be clear. This is, you know, she is a Jamaican American. You know, her family is a family of immigrants. But to me, that doesn't make it, you know, I'm not one of these people that are preoccupied with that, but I do think that that is a distinction worth noting, but I don't think that it's a distinction that's so significant that it would cause me not to vote for somebody. Also, you know, I just want to share my general thoughts. As you know, I've done videos critical of Joe Biden. I've done videos that are critical of Kamala Harris. And what I want to do is show you my page, and then I'm going to talk about this in more detail. Because I know some people may say, well, how can you be, you know, recognizing this moment and essentially celebrating this moment when you've been critical of both of these candidates? You know, first of all, I'm not celebrating the moment. You know, this is not a cause of celebration for me. It is a milestone that needs to be acknowledged, but this is no cause of celebration for me. I'm not, you know, overly enthusiastic about either one of these candidates. In fact, I did not support these candidates during the primary. So I'm not one of these people that is excited about these candidates. So let's be clear. But a lot of times, our assessment of politics shouldn't be based on emotions. It should be based on intelligent calculations. And I'm going to get to that in a second, but I just want to show you all just, the images of some past videos that I've done about these candidates so that you'll know my track record, so people won't come here ill-informed and making all kinds of assumptions about me and my channel. So let me share my page so that you all can see this. So you see, I have these videos right here. I have this video about the debate between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, where I'm talking about how she basically defeated him in that debate. I have this video right here, talking about Joe Biden, Cory Booker, and Louis Farrakhan. I had this other video right here telling people to stop cooning for Joe Biden. And then I have videos that are critical of Kamala Harris, and I'm just going to try to find those. Like, I have this video about reparations, about the fact that she doesn't support reparations. I have videos about her position, her exploiting her identity, and hopefully I can find that here. This video right here that I'm pointing at, this video about her creating this image that she's so pro-Black, but then distancing herself from identifying as specifically African-American and just recognizing herself as an American. And also I deal with the question of her being involved in some interracial relationship while professing to be all pro-Black and stuff. In this video I did, I talk about her record as a prosecutor. It's a mixed bag, and I will get into that a little bit later. And I talk about how, in this video, I talk about her as a side chick to, to this Black politician, this mayor. I think it was, I can't remember. I think somewhere in California, some mayor in California. I can't remember his name, but he's real famous. She had an affair with him, and that particular video talks about how she used that to climb up the ladder of success in politics. So that's just like a sampling of some of the videos that I've done about both Biden and her. I'm not enthusiastic about either one of these candidates. I wish better candidates would have been selected during the primary. I wish that more progressive candidates would have been selected. I wish that we had a candidate that openly supported reparations. But this is what we're left with. These are the Democratic nominees for all intents and purposes, the presumptive nominees. And this election is going to come down to Donald Trump and Pence versus Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We may want to fantasize about some other possibilities, but the fact of the matter is this contest is between those people, between the Democrats and the Republicans. Those are your choices. And when you look at your choices, you will see that of the choices, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the lesser of two evils. And some people may say that that's a dramatic way to describe it, but both sides have negative attributes. But when you weigh the negatives of the Trump administration far outweigh the negatives of a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ticket, by any measure. On one hand, you have Donald Trump that has proven to be openly hostile to our interests. When it comes to voting rights, when it comes to affirmative action, when it comes to police reforms. This is a man that's actually running on attacking protesters, running on law and order, running on how bad the protesters are and all this and that. This is a man who's made blatantly racist statements against Black people. This is a man who's encouraged violence against Black protesters. This man is a despicable person. This is a man with a history of being sued by the Justice Department twice. This is a man who's called out black protesters, called black protesters, those NFL protesters, sons of bitches. He's referred to African countries and Haiti as shithole countries. This man has talked about how he doesn't want black people counting his money. So this man has a long track record of racism. Again, this is a man who celebrated and defended those white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, when they went on their racist rampage there. He defended them. This is a man who enjoys support from people like David Duke and the KKK and those neo-Nazis, the so-called alt-right. So that's Donald Trump over there, a man who appointed, some of the most conservative judges, not only to the Supreme Court, but to federal courts. So you have him on that end, and you have Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has a lot of issues. I've done videos about the crime bill. I talked about that during Hillary Clinton's campaign, and I also talked about it during his. I talked about his problematic statements about segregation and opposing busing and all that kind of stuff. He has issues, no doubt. But when we look at, certain civil rights legislation that he has supported and just his track record is better than Donald Trump's. I mean, it is not the best. He is not the best candidate by any stretch of the imagination, but this is what we have to choose from. We have to be calculated when it comes to politics. A lot of times people are overly emotional when it comes to politics. We have to see which one of these people best serves our interests. And I've told you all the negatives dealing with Donald Trump, and I've told you some of the negatives dealing with Joe Biden. But again, his negatives are relatively low compared to the negatives of Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is reelected, we know what that means for the Supreme Court. You have some of those justices that are getting old, like Ruth Ginsburg. I mean, she's sickly, and we don't know how long she will be on the Supreme Court. If Trump is given another 4 years, who knows how that Supreme Court is going to look. If he appoints another justice to that Supreme Court, that court is going to go far to the right. There will no longer be these split decisions. They will be able to push through their radical right-wing fanatical agenda, which means getting rid of affirmative action. It means, all kinds of reversal when it comes to criminal justice issues and other civil rights issues. The Supreme Court decides all kinds of issues that impact every single aspect of our life. Our civil liberties are affected by decisions that the Supreme Court make. All kinds of voting rights, employee rights, workers' rights, all kinds of discrimination, anti-discrimination laws can be affected by the decisions that the Supreme Court makes. And then you have the lower courts like the U.S. Court of Appeals and, the district courts. This man is appointing all these judges to those courts, and their impact is a lasting impact. It is not an impact that's just felt for the 4 years while Trump is in office. The impact continues on for a lifetime because these people are appointed for life. Making decisions that affect our lives, like the Voting Act. The Voting Act was gutted because of the makeup of the Supreme Court. So the makeup of the Supreme Court matters. Who is in the White House matters. They help drive the agenda, in terms of enforcing various laws. They are in charge. They appoint the heads of all these major agencies in the federal government. And that brings me to a point, so they appoint, let me just go through this. So they appoint the major heads of all the agencies, whether we're talking about housing and urban development, whether we're talking about the Board of Education, whether we're talking about the Justice Department, all of those different agencies, and even the Environmental Protection Agency, all of those different agencies implement and enforce policies that affect our lives. Housing, nothing is housing impacts our lives. Decisions with respect to housing assistance, those things affect our lives. And that's another matter that I have to go into before I get it back into these agencies. So Trump also has attacked, social programs that benefit poor communities, many of whom are disproportionately African American, trying to attack, food assistance and Section 8 housing assistance, things that are beneficial to poor Black communities. So these agencies impact all these different areas. When you look at the Justice Department, many people talk about like we need to investigate this police department and that police department for discriminatory practices. What agency you think does that? That's the Justice Department that investigates that. So if you have a president that doesn't prioritize addressing police brutality, then that matters. That impacts our lives. This president, Donald Trump, has said that police brutality, through his spokespeople, has said that police brutality is a local issue. This man has talked about getting rid of consent decrees and not using consent decrees to reform these police departments. Consent decrees are binding orders from courts that call for certain changes within these police departments. This man doesn't really believe in that. One of the first things that he did when he took office was get this Jeff Sessions to be his attorney general. And that's one of the things that they vowed to do. And that's not to get involved in these disputes between, these issues dealing with police, not to get into these police consent decrees and all that kind of stuff. So it matters who we have for president. And, I encourage y'all not to listen to these buffoons that tell you that federal elections don't matter, because I've just outlined all of these examples, how these federal elections matter, whether we're talking about the makeup of our courts or we're talking about the heads of various government agencies. And if we talk about like just pushing an agenda in terms of legislation, even though it's not the job of the president to enact legislation, we know that the president has a key and very important role in helping to push the agenda, to encourage certain laws to be passed, to encourage or push or urge Congress to pass certain laws. And those laws affect our lives. There are laws that impact us today that we take for granted, all kinds of civil rights laws like the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. All of these acts that are passed by Congress affect our lives. The National Voter Registration Act, all of these things impact our lives. So for somebody to tell you that federal elections don't matter and it's all about local politics, of course, local politics are very important, but federal politics are important as well. Many of the rights that we take for granted have only come about because of federal laws that have been passed. People talk about this police brutality issue. They don't know that there are federal laws being proposed in Congress. With the right person in the White House, they can help push that agenda even harder. But if you have somebody that doesn't prioritize police brutality, that agenda will not be pushed hard. So we have to be careful and, be calculating and be intelligent when it comes to politics. You have many of these hoteps out here telling you that federal elections don't matter, that it doesn't matter who's the president and stuff like that. That's absolutely absurd when, I laid out all these examples. And, people get into this whole thing about the electoral college and all this and that. The fact of the matter is your electors are pledged to vote in accordance with the jurisdiction that they represent. So our popular vote does impact the vote of the electors. Rarely do the electors vote contrary to the vote of the particular areas that they are supposed to represent. So don't let people tell you this stuff about the electoral college and your vote doesn't count and all that kind of stuff. That's nonsense. People can debate all day about whether or not we should have the electoral college, but the fact of the matter is your votes do make a difference. They impact how the electors vote. And these people that constantly talk about how the electoral college is, is deciding things completely contrary to the voters. They can't point to many examples of these electors voting contrary to the jurisdictions that they represent. They just can't. They can't provide many examples of that, where it actually made a difference in the election for president. So that's something that I encourage people to just bear in mind when they consider voting. Don't listen to these people telling you that your vote doesn't count. And then you have some people saying, well, even if they lived in a state that could go either way, some of these people say they're still not voting. And to me, that's stupid. And it reminds me of what happened in places like Michigan and, where I'm originally from. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. In Michigan, that state went to the Republicans by a relatively small number of votes. And many Black people sat home on election day. And they could have made a difference in that election if they actually voted. And, part of the problem is the candidate, they didn't Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate. She didn't encourage people. People weren't inspired by her. But forget being inspired. I mean, like, people are caught up in emotions. This is not some musical concert where you're, there to be entertained. This is not some comedy show where it's about who can make the crowd laugh and all that kind of stuff. This is about important policies that affect our lives. And many people have said, well, Joe Biden doesn't have any kind of Black agenda or anything like that. Many of these people aren't even aware that he laid out an agenda that addresses some issues in the Black community. And I'm not going to say it's a perfect agenda or anything like that, but it's better than anything that Donald Trump has come up with. And what I'll do, instead of searching for it now, what I'll do is I will post a link in the description box so people can read that agenda for yourself. Is it perfect? Of course not. Does it address all the issues? Of course not. But it's up to us to make sure that it addresses the issues. And there's one thing that I want to talk about. I want to jump to this point before I go to these other points. And I will get to your comments. Hopefully I'll have enough time to read your comments tonight. But the point that I want to get to is this. And then, there are several things that need to be discussed. So there's one point that I wanted to make. But there's several things to discuss. Like, one thing, that I already mentioned is this whole question of identity. I already stated my position on that. And, I think that all Black people should take pride in the fact that you do have a Black woman seeking this office that has received the nomination. But, as an African American, like, it would have been great if, and, a so-called descendant of slaves was nominated for that position, an American descendant of slaves. There was one point that I wanted to make that it just has escaped me, but I'm just going to go to these other points while, hopefully this idea comes back to me. One thing that I thought was interesting about these politics is, like, there's a lot of phoniness in politics, man, unfortunately. And so I can understand why people are really disgusted by the process and why they're not enthusiastic about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I completely understand, because, one example is during the debates, this issue of race came up. And Kamala Harris was speaking out against Joe Biden because Joe Biden had made some statements where he was bragging about bragging about working with some segregationists. And then that's even more problematic given his opposition to busing and stuff like that. So Kamala Harris challenged him on that question during the debates. And then, once she's nominated, like after the primaries, after she dropped off out of the primary, she immediately endorsed him. And then now she's like really all enthusiastic because he nominated her for vice president. And it's just strange, like how things change, like with these campaigns and stuff. It's like political theater. Like she was pretending to be so outraged, even though she said that she doesn't claim that he's a racist. She implied that he was a racist during those debates. But here she is, like all excited to be his nominee. And I can understand why people could just be disgusted by that. But as I say, we got to keep our eyes on the prize and focus on what matters, and that's the issues. So I remember what I was going to say. The other point that I wanted to make dealing with this campaign is just that this whole situation shows us the influence and the actual power that the Black community has when it comes to these Democrats. We do have some power to influence the process. Because I'm sure that Joe Biden didn't want to nominate her. There were already all these reports of Joe Biden's team basically saying that she was too ambitious, basically referring to her actually running for president and opposing him and all that kind of stuff during the primaries and making those statements about him and segregation during the primaries. They were saying that she was too ambitious. They did not really want it. I don't think they really wanted to nominate her. It was only as a result of all this pressure from Black women and prominent Black men and women as well that forced them to make this decision. You had a whole bunch of prominent African-American men wrote a letter to Joe Biden, all these successful Black men, in every industry. Like you had people from the entertainment industry, you had other, business leaders and other prominent Black people writing Joe Biden, pressuring him to nominate a Black woman for this position. And you had this drumbeat all on social media where people are saying, we need to have a Black woman in this position. So because of that pressure, he was forced to nominate her. And that's just a demonstration of our power as a people. Even though this is a symbolic thing, it does have meaning, and the vice president does have some power. And we know that the vice president, if something happens to the president, the vice president takes on the role as president. So this is a very significant thing that has happened as a result of political pressure that the Black community applied to the Democratic Party. And it defeats this whole narrative that you hear on social media of powerlessness. It's like people love being, a lot of people, some of these people on here, these YouTube personalities promote victimhood and powerlessness. And they thrive off of conspiracy theories and, hopelessness and stuff like that. The only thing they want you to hope or have hope and faith in is them. And they want you to continue to watch their videos and prop them up and donate money to them. I think that that's a problem. We should be about empowerment by all means that are available to us. And politics is just one of those avenues. And this is an example of Black people applying pressure and actually getting something accomplished. And, I think that, as Clyburn said, I think his name is, Clyburn, the congressman from South Carolina, he emphasized the need to have an African-American woman on the Supreme Court. He talked about how that was more important than having a vice presidential pick. And I agree with him. And I hope that even though Joe Biden appointed this nominated a Black woman to this position, I think that he still needs to nominate a Black person or, a man or a woman to the Supreme Court, preferably a woman, because we don't have a Black woman on the Supreme Court. Not somebody that's just Black, that just happens to be Black, but somebody that is Black politically, somebody that is progressive, because that's an enduring position that goes on for years and years. They need to have some bright young mind in that position that will hold it for many years and have an influence and, impact on the Supreme Court and help shape the direction of the Supreme Court. That's what I'm hoping for. I hope that, that happens. And I think that the same pressure that people applied to get Kamala Harris nominated is the same pressure that people need to apply to get, Supreme Court appointees and also appointees on other lower courts as well. So that's a point that I had to raise in this discussion. And I just have a couple of other points that I want to raise as well. Some people think that this is going to, that this is going to increase Joe Biden's chances of getting elected. They think that it's going to turn out a lot of Black voters. They think that, that this is that Joe Biden basically has this in the bag. A lot of people think this because of everything that's going on in the country right now. You have civil unrest, you have COVID-19, and, tens of thousands of people dying from that virus. You have the economy adversely impacted as a result of that, high unemployment numbers. So many people assume that Joe Biden has this under the bag. And I'm not so sure about that. Because I remember everybody thought Hillary Clinton had this election on lock. I was one of the people that was like, it's no way that this clown, this buffoon, Donald Trump is going to win. But we saw how that turned out. We saw that Donald Trump ended up being president. Despite all the naysayers, despite everything that just about everybody was saying, that man became president. And the same is true for George Bush. We were talking about, right after that Iraq war, people were like, there's no way that this guy's going to, win, after bringing people into a war on false pretenses where hundreds of people, thousands of people died, and it cost the country all this money and stuff like that, a diversion of resources that should have been focused on the so-called war on terror and stuff like that, diverted into some adventure over there in Iraq and stuff like that. People thought he was done, but he won re-election. So nothing should be taken for granted. We have to vote because our lives depend on it, as many people have said. This is important. This will affect our lives for generations to come. You can't say that you are concerned about police brutality and racism and all that kind of stuff if you're not actually engaged in trying to change everything by all the means that are available to you, including electing people, including putting pressure on elected officials on the state and federal level, including demonstrations and stuff like that. You have to be a part of the change that you want to see. It is not enough to just sit back here on YouTube. And I'm not saying that voting is the end all be all, but it is a part of the process. Not only do we need to vote, we need to put our dollars behind candidates that we support if we want to see some change. So yeah, that's one thing that I had to mention. So this thing is not on lock. And one thing that I'm concerned about is this actually galvanizing these white supremacists and racists. Galvanizing them. Because when they see this Black woman as a vice president candidate, a candidate for the vice presidency, that may inspire these people to go harder for Trump, to come out harder when it comes to voting for Trump and all that kind of stuff. It may drive them to the polls in large numbers. We know that this man is supported by white supremacists and racists, people that can't even, the thought of a Black woman as president is sickening to them. Just like they were outraged that we had a Black president, during the Obama administration. These same people are probably hell-bent on preventing this Black woman from acquiring this position. So yeah, I mean, so that's the situation. We can't take this thing for granted. We need to get out there and vote because our votes make a difference. Our votes matter. Um, and no candidate is going to be perfect. Like if you're looking for some candidate that meets every single condition that you want for a candidate, you're not going to be voting often. And by withholding your vote, you're not empowering the Black community. You're further eroding the Black community's power and influence. When people don't vote, they don't count. Because, when people are campaigning, when these candidates are campaigning, one of the first things that they check is whether or not somebody is a regular and consistent voter. That's one of the first things that they check. If somebody is a regular and consistent voter, then they will send out volunteers to their house to canvass and to talk to them and to try to persuade them. And it's during those conversations that you can have influence over the direction of a candidate or to push issues. The people that regularly vote are the ones that get invited to those town hall meetings and all that kind of stuff. The people that are actively engaged in the process, they are the ones that can have influence over the process. When you don't even vote, they're not going to even a lot of times they won't even canvass to your home because it's a waste of their time and energy. They don't, I mean, rarely do candidates have the time to try to persuade people that don't even vote that don't even consider voting a important thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm just encouraging people, if you are not registered to vote, you should register to vote as soon as possible. I don't know what the deadline is in your state. You need to go online, find out what your deadline is to vote, and actually get out there. I mean, your deadline to register, and get out there and register to vote and make sure that you vote in the election. Because it's too much at stake for people to sit at home and act like voting doesn't matter. So yeah, I just had to get that out of my system. So I'm going to read your comments now. I'm going to read through your comments. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, so Covina Man, shout out to Covina Man. So Covina Man said, I have some issues with Kamala, but I think is a great VP pick. Yeah, I have issues with her too. I mean, and I have issues with a lot of these candidates. Like there wouldn't have been a perfect VP nominee, but I would have preferred Susan Rice over Kamala Harris. I think that she has that foreign policy experience that you need for that position. She worked I think she was a national security advisor or something like that. She was in a high-ranking position within the Obama administration, and I think that she had the necessary skills to be successful in that position. And I hope that if Biden gets elected, that he will appoint her to another, similar type of position in his administration. So yeah, she wasn't my I would have preferred, like, ideally, it would have been great if he nominated, like, Joe, what's his name? Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. I think that they are far more progressive than Kamala Harris. But it just wouldn't look good if they nominated Bernie Sanders, because that would be two old white men and stuff like that. And because the Democratic Party places such a emphasis on identity politics, that probably wouldn't have happened. There was probably very limited possibility of that happening. And I think it's kind of problem. There is a problem with the party focusing so much on identity politics. It shouldn't be just about identity politics. It should be about policies. And frankly, if you have a white candidate that's more progressive than a black candidate, I would rather have that white candidate. Just like there, you had the example of a Clarence Thomas, for instance. He's black, all right. He's a so-called American descendants of slaves, but look at what he's done with his position to the detriment of African Americans. So it's not just about like the color of somebody's skin. It should be about what kind of policies and positions they take. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that we need to address that situation. There are specific issues that are relevant that ADOS has pointed out, even though I'm critical of their ideology. And one of the things that I was thinking about is like, these firsts, like these historical firsts, like they say the first African American to do this and that. But these people that are the quote unquote first are not really African. They're not descendants of slaves. I mean, like Obama, even though it's great to have just a black man in there, period. He's not the first. He's not an African American. I mean, his father was an immigrant from Africa, and his mother was a white woman, and he was raised by his white mother and his white grandparents. And then you have Kamala Harris. She's half Indian and half Jamaican, and she was raised by her Indian mother. And they represent an elite group of in the caste system of India. So her experience and her background is completely different from the African American background. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, she had some black experiences, obviously, just as a person of color and by attending Howard University and being in a African American sorority. So she has some experience with the black community and the black experience in general, but her background is not, being a descendant of slaves. And I think that is important. I mean, it's not something that's so important that I wouldn't vote for somebody, but it's something that we really need to think about. We really do need to think about, others being used to say, well, hey, there's no race issue, but yet and still, the American, what they call American descendant of slaves, still is being denied certain opportunities. So there are issues that need to be addressed, and it's good that movement is raising some of these issues. I just take issue with how they raise some of these issues. So I made, I already addressed this stuff about her background and stuff, so I'm not going to go dwell on that. So Covina Man said he was with Biden from day one. I couldn't be with Biden from day one for, the wide range of reasons that I talked about before, his opposing busing, his crime bill that he pushed primarily. And I know back then, you had a lot of the people from the Congressional Black Caucus support that, without knowing what they were really going to do and its impact. But that had a devastating impact on the Black community. Him talking about working with these segregationists and all that kind of stuff. For those reasons, I was not on board to vote for him. And then you had more progressive candidates like Bernie Sanders, as I said before, and Elizabeth Warren. So let's see. Yeah, so this is a good point. So Renaissance Man said, I don't get the pick. She never caught fire with Black people, and progressives and young folks are not going to be a fan of her record. I thought Biden would pick somebody from a swing state. Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid point, because picking somebody from California is not going to help him with the electoral math, because we know that Democrats have California on lock. Like it's unlikely that they would lose California. So that doesn't add anything to the electoral math and all that kind of stuff. If he picks somebody from Michigan, for instance, that may have been more beneficial, because Michigan has gone both ways, for candidates, or somebody from Pennsylvania or something like that. And you're right about her not catching fire. Like people were not like in. I mean, for a brief period of time, she was a front runner for a couple of months, especially after that debate with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's candidacy was in the garbage, man. It was black people that resuscitated his campaign. When all those black people in the South voted for him, the people in places like South Carolina and Georgia and all that kind of stuff, when they voted for him, they gave life to his campaign. That's why he is in debt to the black community. And we got to leverage that and push that as hard as we can to get everything that we're entitled to. And, we're not going to be appeased with crumbs. We're not going to be appeased with him tossing us a bone here and there, like just giving us Kamala Harris. That's not enough. So, yeah, I think you made a valid point with that. And Jonas said Biden just gave Trump 4 more years. And you may be right about that. And for the reasons that I was saying before about these white supremacists possibly being energized by him picking a black woman as his running mate. This may hype them up to go even harder. And then you have a lot of people who just don't want to vote for a woman for that position. They don't want to vote for a black person in that position. Even some of these Democrats who want to pretend like they're all progressive and liberal minded and stuff like that. In the back of their heads, they still harbor sexist views and racist views. So here you have a black woman. And, there may be a lot of people that just won't vote for a black woman for that position. Just like you had Hillary Clinton. A lot of people probably didn't vote for her because of her gender and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's a significant point that you raised right there. Shout out to Queen. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out to Def Rocker. Yeah, I'm not going to make any predictions because you never know how these things go, man. I mean, that Trump election just taught me to stay out of the prediction business. Yeah, so this is a point that I hear a lot, like Democrats or Republicans, neither one of them will save us and stuff like that. And nobody's suggesting that they're going to save us or anything like that. Again, it's about weighing the pros and cons of both parties and both candidates and stuff like that, and making a calculated determination as to which one better serves your interests. I'm not looking for these people to save us. The only people that's going to save us is us. We're the only ones that are going to save ourselves. If we're looking for a savior, we're looking for the change, we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we going to do to change our predicament? Yeah, so all the points about mass incarceration are valid, as I've talked about myself. So this person said, I say we sit out both elect. I mean, I've detailed why that's not a smart decision to sit out any election. Because when you sit out the election, you won't get you saying, I don't want to settle for the lesser two evils. When you sit out the election, basically you're telling those rednecks and those racists and stuff like that, those bigots and other people, you're saying, let you guys make the decision as to who is going to be president. You're basically turning over your power to your enemies and letting them decide who's going to be the president. And basically you're allowing the worst of those choices to be empowered. You're helping to empower them. And I don't see how there's anything revolutionary about sitting out anything. In the words of Malcolm X, like when he talked about people calling their protests a sit-in, he said anybody can sit, a chump can sit, a coward can sit and stuff like that. It takes nothing to sit at home and do nothing. It's like we have become the do nothing culture, where people mistake apathy for activism. They're all caught up into this slacktivism. People aren't, a lot of these people aren't a part of any organization fighting to make a difference in their community. They're not a part of any political groups or any community groups. They don't attend any kind of meetings or participate in any kind of demonstrations. All they do is sit at home in the comfort of their home, watching these Black Power entertainers and think that by typing something on social media, they're actually doing something. We can't sit around anymore. We can't sit around when it comes to voting. We can't sit around when it comes to engaging in activism in our communities and fighting to make a difference. We can't leave anything on the table. We have to use every means that is available to us to make a difference in our lives. Every single means is available to us. If you have an arsenal, you're not going to, and you're in the middle of a war, you're not going to say, well, I'm not going to use this weapon or that weapon. I'm just going to stick to this one weapon. You're going to use everything that you got in your arsenal. And when we neglect our obligation, our duty to vote, a duty that our ancestors and elders fought for, we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage. Our elders fought and died for the right to vote. People like John Lewis went on that bridge in Selma and faced those police dogs and batons and brutality so that we could have the right to vote. And you got some lazy, trifling people that don't want to even exercise that right to vote. It takes nothing for you to stand in the line and vote. And even nowadays, because of COVID, you can just drop your ballot in the mail a lot of times. How does it hurt you to vote? What do you have to lose from voting and stuff? I've cited examples of how Black people have had some influence over this election. Yeah, and that's another great point that Def Rocker brought up about Trump trying to get rid of low-income housing in suburban areas. And all that means is that he wants to drive out Black people from these areas. A lot of times you have these exclusive suburban neighborhoods, and you may have some low-income housing, some Section 8 or something like that, or low-income housing that's designed to diversify those areas so that they are not just white enclaves and stuff. You had this affordable housing and stuff like that that makes it possible for lower income people to be able to benefit from quality schools and stuff like that, to have all these different opportunities that they wouldn't have in certain other impoverished communities. But Donald Trump wants to close that door. He just wants to promote segregation, just like he did back when he was a landlord, refusing to rent to Black people. And this is the person you want to say that, you can't decide who you choosing between these candidates and stuff like that. You want to pretend like these are one and the same. They are not one and the same. Anybody that tells you that those candidates are one and the same, that's somebody that's not informed on the issues. That's somebody that hasn't done any research on this stuff. That's somebody that's intellectually lazy. So, I encourage people to do your research. Don't just listen to what I'm talking about. Research these candidates. Again, I'll post a link to Joe Biden's agenda and stuff like that, his website and stuff, so people could check it out. Again, I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of him or Kamala Harris, but these are the choices that we have. It is what it is. And Trump must go. Not only for all the reasons that I already cited, but just look at how he's dealing with this COVID-19 crisis. This is a man who said it is what it is when it comes to all these thousands of people dying, Over 160,000 people have died from this virus. And his response is, it is what it is. When there could have been a federal mandate for social distancing and wearing a mask, this man downplayed that stuff. And as a result, you got thousands of people dead. Trump must go. And we have to be the ones to take him out of office by voting. This is not a game. It's not a game at all. Yeah, so Aunt Jam said that the main black person that initiated the hate for Kamala Harris is Tariq, a clear Trump supporter. Trump don't like Biden, didn't like Bernie, and anyone that opposed Trump. And that's a valid point. Like, you got people out here that are deliberately encouraging black people to stay at home. That man ran a don't vote campaign, encouraging people not to vote. And all that equals is a vote for Donald Trump. We got to keep our eyes on the prize. I mean, a lot of these people, they are promoting apathy in our community. That's what they're promoting. They are taking on the same basic role as a Kanye West. Here you had this Kanye West clown who knows there is no way in hell that he's going to win, who has these Trump operatives working for his campaign, helping out his campaign, helping to get him on the ballot in various states. And this guy, Kanye West, acknowledged that he doesn't have any problem if his campaign helps elect Donald Trump. In fact, he pointed out how that's one of the purposes behind his election, from what I recall. At least he's blunt about what he's doing. But you got these fake pro-black people on here that are nothing but, at the end of the day, Trump operatives, in effect. Even if they don't deliberately support Donald Trump, their actions and their advocacy supports the continuation of the Trump administration in the White House. Yeah, so yeah, and one thing I want to say is, like, before I even go any further, like, if our vote didn't matter, do you really think they would have spent all those years preventing black people from voting, lynching black people for trying to vote, establishing poll taxes and literacy tests and all that kind of stuff to prevent you from voting? If our vote didn't matter, why would they even go through the process of gutting the Voting Rights Act in the Supreme Court? If our vote didn't matter, why would they be rushing to implement all these laws right after the Voting Rights Act was gutted to suppress black voters? Things like voter ID requirements, knowing that it have a disproportionate impact on black communities. Things like getting rid of early voting, making it more difficult for organizations to register people to vote. All of these measures, if our vote didn't matter, they wouldn't go through all that stuff. So let's see what you all are saying. Yeah, so that's a great point, Renaissance Man, about the redrawing of districts. Like, all these things are very important, and elections impact all of those things. Yeah, so this is an interesting point. Demetrius said there's a reason why her campaign failed, and now it's going to cost us our democracy. Had Biden picked a 50-ish white male veteran, that cockroach would be gone. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like a catch-22. I mean, that always becomes the excuse that the Democrats use. Like, for many years they were saying that it would be difficult to win an election if you had a black running mate or a black person as the nominee and stuff like that. And somebody like Barack Obama really shattered that idea. But I understand where you're coming from, and there may be something to that, especially in this climate right now. But Barack Obama shattered that idea. Here you had a black man with an African name, still win, the presidency and be reelected. So we shouldn't sell ourselves short. We shouldn't assume that, it's not possible but you raise a valid point, and that may ring true. We'll find out on election day. Yeah, her nomination, I think that there's something to what you're saying here. Her nomination probably was designed to activate the black vote and encourage more people to come out to vote, because we know that a lot of black people were not enthusiastic about Biden. Like, he's not somebody that everybody's hyped up about. And the only way that he can build, like one of the ways that he tried to build enthusiasm is by equating himself to Obama and stuff like that. So yeah, you're right. I agree with what you're saying there. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Tammy Duckworth. I see that Morgan mentioned her. I'm not familiar with her. Just bear with me as I look through your comments. Yeah, so Convener Man mentioned that older black people are more moderate than progressive, and yeah, that's true. That's why a lot of them, voted for Joe Biden over, people like um, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Um, and the thing about that is, older black people tend to vote more than younger black people. Um, So that's something to keep in mind. Like, a lot of young people, they may be out there marching, but the same people that are out there marching don't march to the polls. And, that's a problem. And then they want to complain about getting the same old politicians. But if you're not voting in these primaries, then you're going to get the same old politicians. You're going to get these moderates that, many of us are not satisfied with. Yeah, so I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I truly appreciate it. Shout out to everyone in the chat room. Sorry I didn't have time to read every single comment, but I appreciate you leaving the comments in the chat room. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Peace and blessings, everyone. Have a great evening and enjoy your day tomorrow. Peace.